Hi, I'm Robert Wright. I run the Nonzero Foundation, which produces all the shows on Blogging Heads TV and Meaning of Life TV. We host a variety of voices, some of them pretty unorthodox, and we encourage dialogue that is sharp but civil. We think fostering constructive conversation is especially important now that America and the world are looking kind of fragile. If you agree that our mission is important, I hope you'll consider helping us shoulder the cost. You can do that by becoming one of our cherished patrons at patreon.com/Nonzero Foundation. That's NonzeroFoundation. Thanks. We need your help, and we deeply appreciate it.
Hi, welcome to Culturally Determined on Blogging Heads TV. I'm your host, Aryeh Cohen-Wade. And my guest today is someone who probably needs no introduction if you've ever looked at this website or listened to this podcast before. And that is Robert Wright. So, Bob, introduce yourself in whatever way you want to.
I wouldn't underestimate the extent to which people might actually need to have me introduced. I can imagine looking at the website without knowing who I am. Anyway, I am Robert Wright. I'm co-founder of Blogging Heads TV and Meaning of Life TV, president of the Nonzero Foundation, which now operates them, and therefore we should say, by way of full disclosure, your boss.
Right.
If people sense undue deference being directed toward me, that could explain that. I've written books, most recently Why Buddhism is True, and I've written other things. And and I have a show, The Wright Show, which, like your show, is sometimes on Blogging Heads TV and sometimes on Meaning of Life, right?
That's true, yeah. Most of my stuff ends up on Blogging Heads, but occasionally it's also on Meaning of Life TV. You also are the editor, writer of the Nonzero newsletter.
Oh, right.
I think that's most of the things to plug. But this is Culture Determined. This is my show, and as we said before, you're my boss, so everyone should keep that in mind throughout this discussion. But I asked you on to do this because I've been watching basically all of your content over the past year or so, and particularly the stuff you've been
not
doing.
by choice, but because you're getting paid to process it. But yeah.
Particularly the stuff you've been doing with Mickey Kaus weekly during the pandemic, and you seem pretty pessimistic, or at least concerned about Joe Biden's electoral prospects in November. I'm more sanguine about them. I think it's close to a sure thing he's going to win. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk to you about it and try to, make my case that things, people who are just subscribing to the Wright Show and watching you and Mickey, they may be getting, they may be having anxiety attacks, or they may be feeling a sense of despair because of the coming election. And I want to just boost people up and let them know that I think things will be okay. Although, of course, we can't really know, and maybe I'll be totally embarrassed in a couple months after the election. But you have experience with that, don't you? That's true. I made some very wrong predictions in the past, especially about Trump. But so did a number of people. Well, no, but you predicted he would drop out of the race or something, right? That's true. And I still actually think he may resign after the election. He may still drop out of the 2016 race. You think it's not too late? Well, it would be interesting if he was in full command of his faculties, if he could undo what he's done. I don't think his life. Careful is really throwing around those kind of allegations if you're a Biden supporter. But anyway, go ahead. Well, I don't think and that's an interesting angle into this, because would Trump run again if he could go back 3.5 years or 4.5 years, whatever. I guess it was the mid 2015, so it's almost more than 5 years when he first announced. Would he do it again, and why did he run in the first place, and why is he running for re-election, and what does he actually want? And Trump, as we've discussed, guests and I on this show repeatedly, is a very strange person. He's unlike any other politician in American history, really, and doesn't want the normal things that a normal politician wants. So the normal president runs for re-election because they all run for re-election, and they want, for a variety of reasons, they have policies they want to implement. They want there's like a huge machinery around them that's geared up to get them reelected. I guess it's fun being president. You get to like travel around and meet people, and you're the most powerful person in the world, and all sorts of great things, and people kiss your ass all the time. But what does so some of those things Trump likes, like the ass kissing and being the most powerful person in the world, and then other parts of them I think he doesn't really care about, like like the policy or like most of the power. Actually, I think he more cares about flattery than.
I think he cares more about attention than power. On the other hand, the president has a greater ability to command attention than any other human, certainly in America and possibly on the planet. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, he's the central figure everyone in America and probably most of the people in the world have been thinking about for the past 4 years or so, and I'm sure he likes that. But when you think about his strange psychology, what he actually likes, he likes watching TV and seeing the people on TV talking about him and saying nice things about him. He likes people kissing his ass. I think he just likes being talked about in general, kind of a right. I was going to say
he's bad publicity.
He'd rather them be saying nice things, I think, but he'd rather them be saying unkind things than saying nothing at all. Right, and that's a classic thing going back to like his rise and how he manipulated the New York City tabloid press and stuff to get attention for himself. And then he likes playing golf. He likes doing the rallies. I think he's probably happiest when he's doing the rallies. So are you still arguing that it's a close call whether he actually wants to remain president or what? Yeah, I mean, I kind of half jokingly said he might just drop out or something. And Mickey Cow suggested this as well, that Cow said he might use his acceptance speech at the RNC to announce that he was dropping out as sort of a giant twist to like a reality TV show. And how did that go? Dramatic twist. So that didn't happen. Right. But okay, so what does he? But he doesn't care. He doesn't care about policy. He doesn't care about people. He doesn't care about the welfare of the American people. He doesn't care about the welfare of his supporters. He doesn't care about either the supporters, the MAGA people out there in the nation, or kind of like the inner ring beyond the family and Jared, I would say, are the people he cares about. I'm willing to stipulate that. But he definitely doesn't care about policy. And if you had asked me, and probably most people, November 2016, like 4 years from now, is there going to be a wall, or at least like most of a wall built along the Mexico border? I probably said, yeah, I think like this is the main thing he ran on, was build the wall, and Mexico's going to pay for it. It was like, clearly Mexico wasn't going to pay for it, but like that was his main thing. And they're going to build that wall, and like it's going to be like crazy, but they're actually like, that's what he cares about. But like the wall hasn't been built, and we don't hear about the wall anymore. He doesn't seem to care. His supporters don't care. They moved on to other things. Yeah, it is a little surprising to me that his chances are as good as they are, because there are a couple of things he really emphasized that he'd do and said it very clearly. And he had control of Congress for 2 years and he didn't do it. One is build a wall. The other is he's going to cancel Obamacare and replace it. He said he'd do these two things on the same day. And he said he would do them like within, I don't know, a month of inauguration day or something. I mean, it was like, the one thing he has done is address the immigration problem in the sense of getting very aggressive with immigration law enforcement in a way that makes resident illegal immigrants very uncomfortable. He has inflicted a lot of suffering on them, and I don't know whether that's discouraging immigration. So I don't know whether it has the practical effect that presumably he would use to defend it. But he has inflicted a certain amount of suffering. And, I should add that I would add that to the things that he enjoys in life is inflicting suffering on his enemies or people he just doesn't like people who are coming from Central America to try to get a job in America. He does seem to like inflicting suffering. There was this story about how when he was a kid, I mean, this was documented, I think, that by some neighbor's testimony or something, he used to throw rocks at there was some like toddler in a crib in the adjacent backyard, and he'd like throw rocks at them or something. He's not a nice guy. Yeah, so he's a naturally cruel person, and et cetera. Okay, so what, you want me to defend my concerns? Well, so what is he? So the fourth term, the second term. There's not a lot that it seems like he actually wants to do in the way that like
a normal politician has like ideas for what they can do in the second term. Usually the second term they accomplish less than what they do in the first term. And yeah, he didn't. A lot of the main things he said he wanted to do, he didn't accomplish. They got a big tax cut, and that was Paul Ryan's thing. I mean, he got either snookered by Paul Ryan or he just didn't care about getting his actual agenda passed. But they tried and failed to get Obamacare repealed, and they successfully got a big tax cut. And then they got the Supreme Court justices appointed and numerous lower court justices appointed. And then all the kind of like regulatory stuff that having Republicans in office would do, but Trump doesn't care about that stuff. So does he really want to be doing this? But then also like, okay, if Trump did want to like be reelected, wouldn't he try to push through like a massive economic stimulus and start like sending checks to people? I mean, they did this once already, and it seemed to help at least somewhat with the calamity.
Well, but he did. I mean, I didn't understand the politics of that particular issue. I would say that when Congress failed to extend the economic relief package, he did step in with partial relief via some kind of executive order or the equivalent thereof that got people about half of what they had been receiving or something. So he did.
This is the withholding thing where it's like postponing withholding. I forget how it worked.
I think the number was $300 a month or $600 a month or something. I don't know, but he did something. Look, well, he's not. So are we gonna talk about whether he's actually going to drop out? I mean, what are we talking about?
I don't think he's going to drop out. But basically, I mean, he doesn't want to be doing this. He likes going to the rallies. There's a lot
about the job he doesn't want. Obviously, right. On balance, he wants the job. He sought it. He kept it. He's seeking it again. If he gets it, he'll keep it.
I think it's more by accident and kind of floating along with like going with the course of the river kind of thing.
Well, I agree that I do think when he initially announced that he was running, he probably thought, very little chance of getting it, but I'll build the brand. I don't deny that. But, a lot of politicians do that. How many of the people on that Democratic debate stage honestly thought they had like a better than 50% chance?
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. But the difference is like Trump ran, normal, like maybe, Cory Booker ran so that someday he could be like appointed like Secretary of Education or whatever the hell he actually cares about.
That's a common thing.
Whereas Trump just did it so that he could like get attention and sell hats. So it's just like a weirder thing that usually doesn't happen.
Well, or get attention and start a media property. I mean, where is Beto O'Rourke going with this? He's not going to get a cabinet position. But he wants to build the Beto brand. Or right, Beto band. It may actually be a rock and roll band. We don't know.
but we can, I don't know, but the normal politician cares less about like just making money and getting attention or something than like advancing through the ranks in some way that's like within the system, whereas Trump is like an outsider to the system, which is like wants people to pay attention to him, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, but anyway, so this is all, in a way, this is all the side point. Like, okay, so what's going to happen? So I've been saying for a while, and I think I maybe said on the show that even before the pandemic, I thought any of the 27 or so Democrats who are running, if any of them were nominated, that person would beat Trump. Including like Marianne Williamson and all the other, and like some of the other wackos. And I just thought it was because, Trump won in this weird, way. He 46% to 48% he won. So it was a weird kind of triple bank shot thing. And the Trump base is not 46%. The Trump base is like 37%. And those are the diehards who will vote for him, even if, there were 2 million COVID casualties.
Well, his favorability rating has hovered a few points above that, but anyway, whatever. It's not over 50, and it's not that close to 50. I agree.
So whenever there's a poll that's like asking some obvious, like a question about Trump where the answer is obviously no, like is Trump like thoughtful and like does he like consider the opinions of like experts when making decisions or something? The number of people who say yes is like 36, 37, 38% of people who are just like they're it's like a quasi-cult of personality kind of thing. They're with Trump, do or die. And so 37% is not enough to win, even with the Electoral College when there's only there's not really third-party candidates to.
Well, okay, but he did win, right? We know that this can work. He can win an election even though his base is not huge, right? We know that.
Right. Okay, but one, he hasn't expanded his base at all since the election.
Apparently he didn't need to. It was big enough to get elected president.
Well, it's only shrunk since then, and two, Hillary Clinton's not on the ticket. So
no, but instead we have somebody that many people, more and more people, have grave doubts about the cognitive competency of.
I think it's tough to be an honest person and say I've grave doubts about Biden's cognitive competency, and not say I have grave doubts about Trump's cognitive competency as well. Biden seems a bit worse than Trump,
but they're different issues. Biden is clearly declining, and I don't want to make too big a deal. And I apologize to people who think if you support a candidate, you shouldn't say anything negative about them. That's just not my school of thought. I'm just more of a journalist than a partisan activist. But Biden is clearly declining. Of course, they're both declining. I'm declining. Everybody over 50 is declining. No, I am. I notice it. But everybody over 50, certainly over 60, is declining.
But Trump is as well.
What?
If you look at videos of Trump from 4 or 5 years ago, it's clear that he's declining as well. Do you remember during the debate, one of the debates in 2016, Hillary said something like, I'd be afraid to be in a world where Donald Trump is president, and Trump said that's because you'd be in jail. So it was like this. It was like a very witty comeback.
Yeah.
Can you imagine him today coming up with something like that? He just rambles and goes around points and gets kind of confused and comes back. Like he's aged 4 or 5 years as well as everyone else. Like he's in decline as well, and he's worse than he was even 4 years ago.
I think he. First of all, I really don't think the decline is as rapid as Biden. Again, anyone that age will be declining if they're normal. But I also think, in a way, of course, you could to some extent say this about both of them. I think Trump benefits for how kind of jumbled he was from the beginning. I mean, true, that was a great comeback. But from day one, if you read a transcript of Trump talking, you might have trouble understanding it. It would tend to come through a little better if you saw it, if you heard it. But he was never super coherent.
Yeah, I agree.
What's that?
I think he had, if there's this interview that you can find on YouTube what he did with Oprah in 1986 or something, he's a lot more coherent. He's 40 years old there, and he speaks in paragraphs that are understandable. And, when he ran for president, he was, 69 or 70. So it's clear he had some kind of decline, but it's continued to go. But anyway, Hillary Clinton is not just cognitive decline. There's a large percentage of the population, and I didn't understand this in 2016,
that hate
Hillary Clinton. And this is most evident in Bernie Sanders' performance in 2020 relative to 2016. There were a lot of people who voted for Bernie. He got around 45% of the vote in the primary in 2016, and this time he got around 30 or something. And there were a group of there are people, even the Democratic Party partisans, voting in the primary who were I hate that Hillary Clinton. I just can't stand her. And is it sexism? Is it her being a dirty crook? Whatever it is, she was really radioactive for a lot of people, even registered Democrats, in a way that Joe Biden, Uncle Joe, the doddering grandpa, isn't radioactive.
Well, look, there are some ways in which Biden, the person, has advantages over Hillary, the person, as a candidate. Some ways in which he doesn't. But in any event, those are not the end of the story. There's a bunch of stuff going on in the country. Some of it works for Trump, some of it doesn't. There's a pandemic. There's demonstrations. Sometimes there's riots. There's all kinds of stuff going on. And I think you have to take the totality of that into account. Let me just be clear about my position. I would not bet against Biden. If you asked me to bet even money, I'd probably bet, if I were just trying to make money and didn't care and my heart weren't in it, I'd probably bet Biden. On the other hand, if you look at 538, they give Biden a 76 or 77% of chance of winning. I think that's exaggerated. I would take those. I would bet on Trump and take those odds. Now,
at 3 to 1 or something like that.
What's that?
At 3 to 1, you would take Trump.
Yeah, I guess that's about what it would come out to. Interestingly, the betting markets itself aren't anywhere near that. Now, I'm not saying the people who bet on the betting markets are geniuses, but unlike 538, they can take into account things other than the polls, which maybe 538 does a little, but they do more than that, and they're not bound to trust the polls to the extent that 538 in a sense is. But they're only there. It's like 53 Biden, 47 Trump. At one point, it was 51-49. I think at one point, it's 50-50. So the people with actual money to put on it consider Biden to have an advantage, but not a huge one. And I'd say that's about, well, actually, I might give Biden a little more of an edge than the betting markets are. I would be somewhere between the betting markets and Nate Silver, but I just think it's a long way from Biden being a super clear-cut favorite. Let me say, look, I'm a worrier. That's what I do. I worry. On the other hand, and if you're a chronic worrier, thank God you're going to be wrong sometimes, right? Because the things don't always turn out horribly. On the other hand, I think I was maybe the first person on Twitter. I mean, it was really shortly after the Brexit vote that I said, you realize the implications of this for the Trump election. It's like the polls undercounted the Brexit vote. That vote is very much like the Donald Trump vote in terms of ideology and demographics. And it could be that part of what's going on, I'm not saying I said all this exactly like this, but the drift of it was, it could be that part of what's going on is people are reluctant to admit to pollsters that they're voting for Brexit. And you might have the same reluctance with Trump. Do not count this guy out. The other thing I'll say is, everyone now, and for the last few months, maybe 6 months, has been talking about Joe Biden's cognitive issue. I was talking about it 2 years ago, okay? Because it is a real issue. I can show you a tweet. It's not that I made a point of tweeting about it, but it's that like in December of 2019 or something, somebody tweeted that I had been talking about this on the podcast. Mm-hmm. And I chimed in and said, yeah, I'm not saying he has like advanced dementia, but I predict that he will have like senior moments that will be a problem. I think this is a significant issue. Now, he has not had a fatal senior moment, but he's had bizarro moments like the famous Black parents need record players moment in the Democratic debates. And he's had, there's been a lot of stuff.
I mean, he still won. I mean, that's the thing, like the dementia, there's some level of cognitive decline that's there. He still managed to run the table in the Democratic primary. So there's various interpretations of that. One is that people don't see it, or maybe they don't care, or they're just like, I remember Joe, he was Barack Obama's friend, let's stick with him. Yeah, well, or the personal qualities of the person, don't matter as much because Trump has said 10 times as many crazy things as Biden has because Trump is just talking all the time.
Sure. No, he can definitely win. I will say that as far as him winning the Democratic nomination, another thing I said early on is this is a horrible array of candidates. If you just wanted to go to central casting and pick out a Democratic politician who could beat Donald Trump, they are available, but they're not on this stage.
Yes, I remember you saying that, but don't you think that Biden is the closest thing to that?
If not for the cognitive problem, yes. If not for the perception and for how kind of old he looks in certain kinds of light and stuff. You take away that issue. I mean, the thing about Biden, and again, this in a way helps him. He was always a gaffe machine. Right. He always was a little undisciplined in his speech. And so maybe this will allow people to chalk up these, quote, gaffes to that. And that's fine. But now I'm having a senior moment. I forget where I was going with this.
I don't know either, but okay, let's transfer to this. Okay, so like I said, I thought everyone
was going somewhere, damn it.
I thought everyone would win. Yeah, I thought Marianne Williamson and Andrew Yang would.
Yeah. Oh, the other thing that happened is, look, okay, so there weren't great candidates. None of them were jumping ahead. The Democratic establishment freaked out about Bernie Sanders. And so when he showed that vulnerability, and what was it? He lost North Carolina or something. They jumped in on behalf of Biden. And so it's not like Biden just won the beauty contest heads down.
Right. I mean, that's true in part. I think it was maybe after Nevada that they like Buttigieg and like three other Klobuchar like endorsed him.
Right. Actually, it was the dropping out before North Carolina, wasn't it?
Yes, because he swept all the southern states. The different, the power of older black voters in the Democratic primary nominating process is much more powerful than it is in the, the electoral college as a whole. But anyway, I think, putting, Biden aside, like things have gotten worse in this country since January 2020, when I thought any of these people basically would have beaten Trump, like objectively worse. And I think that's another thing that I think is kind of absent from your analysis, which is like, and it, sort of like material conditions, like things are bad. I guess the economy isn't as bad as it was in, April or May or something, but 200,000 people have died of COVID. I'm sure it's maybe even twice as much if the actual number. And there's there's unrest throughout the country. Shitty things are going on. It's a reelection. A presidential reelection is a referendum on the incumbent, and you kind of have to be in the tank to think like Trump has really done a good job. Biden is not. He as close to he knows how to be president. Basically, like everyone kind of knows that the vice president's ready to like step in. Obviously, he's lost a step, but he's not like. He isn't Marianne Williamson. This isn't like someone off the street. If the current president was a reality TV star before he became president, Biden had 40 years of experience in government or whatever. So I think people are just gonna like go to it because like I think basically I don't think messaging really matters at this point. I don't think maybe there could be some crazy gaffe that happens that could really upset things, like if he like fell down or at the debate or something, or like soiled himself on stage. Like you have to imagine something crazy to really like disrupt how things are going. That would indicate that he like really is just totally lost. So that could happen, but it seems unlikely. So I basically think there's not gonna be like a killer commercial or anything. It's like the facts of the economy and people's lives and material conditions are such that like absent some sort of crazy thing happening, and certainly crazy things have happened this year already. I just think
okay,
it's almost a lock for Biden.
Okay, so you're assuming that the incumbent gets blamed for like everything. So there is a pandemic. Now, first of all, in some countries, this has helped the leaders politically. They've done a pretty good job. It's not inherent in a pandemic, and I would say with things in general, the economy, the pandemic, and so on, often it can be as important or more important, whether at the time of the election people feel things are getting better or worse. That can be as important or more important than the overall magnitude of what has happened in the past. So if the economy seems to be briskly picking up, and it's a little too soon to say for sure whether there will be a sense that the economy is getting better, whether there will be a sense that the pandemic's getting better. Now, one thing that seems to be definitely happening is that things are getting worse in a number of European countries in a way that may allow Trump to say, look, this is a problem for everybody. They're doing worse than we are right now.
But again, that's kind of a messaging thing. Like
it is.
But are there really receptive people out there who are like on the edge of whether or not Trump deserves re-election, and then like they're open to Trump's argument? I just feel like Trump is such an extreme, polarizing figure that people are basically decided, one way or the other. It's not going to be like a clever message or a new slogan or some sort of campaign stunt or other like media type thing is going to.
Well, if people have decided, then we're done. I mean, there's two questions: are there a significant number of people who haven't made up their minds? And I think there are still people telling pollsters they haven't. And then the question is, are the polls to be trusted? And this gets at the second big prevailing condition, or the third maybe, depending on how you count, which is the social unrest. Mm-hmm. Now, there are some people who just assume the incumbent suffers from social unrest. But I will say that in this case, and for a while the polling seemed consistent with that. George Floyd was killed in June. Through July, Trump's numbers were getting, if anything, worse. But then they turned around, okay, and it's like the further you got from the incident, the outrageously unjust killing of Floyd, and the more like the protests persisted and even assumed in some cases very unruly form, at some point, Trump started to do better and better and better. Since late July, he's done better and better and better. Basically,
it goes that's a lot of betters. It's a lot of betters. It's like going from 40 to 43 or something.
His favorability rating is way better. It's like if you look at his underwater number.
Is it over 50?
No, it's just better. I mean, he's still underwater. He's still underwater by like 8 points or something.
Okay. Well, I mean,
but he was like underwater. He was underwater by like 15.
Well, when the protest started, my assumption was, images of people looting, black people in the streets, general like urban unrest. This helps. Like this will almost always help reactionary politicians because they'll say law and order. We need to crack down on them and let's take out the batons kind of thing. Like Chicago 1968 all over again. That's what it seemed like to me, and that didn't seem to happen. I mean, it's possible that some people got pushed towards Trump's law and order message by by rioting, arson, looting, etc. But it's hard to tell how many that is or whether that's ephemeral or what. I mean, there's something new that happens every day, so it's hard to know. The absurdity of the most extreme version of this was like, I think Donald Trump Jr. or something tweeted, an image of like some like black people assaulting a white person, and they were like, "This is Joe Biden's America." And then people chimed in, actually, this is Donald Trump's America. Like, it's happening now. He's the president. Like, the buck stops here, kind of thing. So I don't know. So I don't know how people, the average person, sees that if they see.
Okay, but
if they see unrest in the streets, or if they blame the mayor of the town,
right?
Or if they blame the cops, or if they blame, the minorities, or what?
In trying to turn this issue into to his favor, Trump has some things to work with. One is that, these mayors are Democrats. And in some cases, the mayors are like, let's face it, they're not exactly Frank Rizzo when it comes to law and order. I mean, it's like, the other is just that the whole movement that gave birth to the protests, and of course, I'm not saying that it's like Black Lives Matter per se that's responsible for looting or anything else. But if you look at which party is more closely associated with the protests that led to what disorder there is, that in some cases morphed into what disorder there is, it's clearly the Democratic Party.
Right.
And the leaders of the party are bound to stick with it. As I told Nikki on our show not long ago, Kamala Harris was on, I think she was on the Stephen Colbert's show, and she's like, these protests aren't going to let up before the election. They're not going to let up after the election, and they shouldn't. And that is just like, I don't know if they've made as good a use of that clip as they in principle could, the Trump team, that is, by cutting the ads and running them on Fox News. But I think that's ill-advised. And I want to say two things relate two things that have really drawn my attention to this. One, as I told Mickey, I was having a conversation a few weeks ago with somebody, a Washington think tanker. I had just taped the dialogue with him, and he said to me, this was off tape, so I can't identify with him, but he said, I'm worried in where I live in the Virginia suburbs, there are so many people who, if you really press them, they are so unhappy about the demonstrations. They are so fed up and sick of it. And I worry that they're the ones who will not tell the pollsters that they're so fed up that they're going to vote for Trump, but they might. Okay. The second data point is I have just recently had conversations with people I know who are like progressives of unimpeachable credentials. They're almost stereotypes of progressives. If you look at like their whole milieu, what they do for a living, what they read, they're just stereotypes of progressives. And they are fed up with a lot of aspects of this. The demonstrations are like, what are they accomplishing at this point other than showing off? I mean, they've got almost nothing concrete. And to some extent, this is me talking. It's like, what concrete has come from these demonstrations? I mean, I was early on saying the demonstrators, they have a rare opportunity to try to get a lot of federal money, a lot of tax revenue steered toward things that benefit the inner cities. Better health care for low-income people, better education. They're not even trying to do that, so far as I can see.
Yeah,
they're getting all these token victories. We now capitalize the word black. That's their idea of a big victory.
Well, okay, here's the thing. I question whether the people who are out in the streets would see capitalizing black or the fact that, like, Pepsi Cola, put up a tweet that says Black Lives Matter. I question whether they would see that as a victory. Like, if you're going out in the streets, I don't know how, sophisticated your political analysis is, but like,
okay, what have they accomplished? Right? What would they brag about that they've done? What have they accomplished?
I don't really know. I agree. Most protests essentially does nothing. I can't think of a protest that I've ever been to that accomplished the goal. The last one was probably the March for Our Lives.
Okay, but what are the goals? What are the goals? Are they policy goals?
I'm not here to defend the Black Lives Matter protests. I think I've been harping on for a while about how American life becoming cosplay and people kind of like dressing up and going to the streets and fighting with each other. Sometimes they actually have guns and murder each other. But it's kind of like enacting a moral drama in which you're the hero, someone else is the villain, and you get to like post some of the pictures on Instagram afterwards. So I agree that there's a lot of like nonsense that's happening there. And maybe if there's some cities that are reallocating police budgets towards mental health counseling or something, that would be a victory, but that's probably not going to happen. In fairness,
let me just stop and say, in fairness, I don't want to, some of what comes under the rubric defund the police, which, by the way, is the worst political slogan I've ever heard.
I agree.
How counterproductive and stupid it is. But but some of the things under the rubric actually make sense. There are things that the cops are doing that cops are not well suited to do, but this brings us back to what a bad rubric defund the police is. I mean, in addition to the fact that it just alienates because the police, they want the police there to.
But Democrats are not running on the defund the police platform. Like, Biden wants to increase money for police.
I'm just explaining why. I mean, let me add that my other thing about defund the police is like that turns. I mean, this was an opportunity to get a lot more revenue directed toward the inner city, okay, and low-income communities, and not necessarily only black communities, but including low-income black communities. And the phrase defund the police, what they're saying is, no, we don't want any extra money, but if we just have some money from the police budget and move it over here, think big. Say tax the rich and give us a bunch of money to fix a bunch of things. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, the strategic goals of the protests, such as they are, these were not organized protests, really. I mean, BLM is not really an organized movement. Like, these are kind of spontaneous things that happen all over the country in a way they haven't ever before. I guess mainly through like information technology spread awareness of these things. But anyway, I just want to say to the thing about the shy Trump voter, the one who was telling the pollster. That they're going to vote for Biden, but actually they're going to vote for Trump. I don't buy that. Originally this was like this idea that, a voter, the candidate is a black candidate. They don't want to be seen as racist in saying they're not going to vote for the black candidate. So they lied to the pollster because that makes a sort of sense. Like being seen as racist or being accused of racist is like, up there with first degree murder in America. But just telling, lying to the pollster that you don't support Trump when you really do. I don't think there's that many people out there. I don't know even how polls are working these days. Who's answering these polls? Who answers their phone from a stranger, like a call they don't recognize? I don't know where they're getting these numbers. I don't think there's a lot of people out there who are secret Trump voters and are telling the pollsters they're voting Biden. I don't think that's a thing, but who knows? But okay, so I guess. It sounds like I haven't convinced you.
Let me just be clear. The point of my little tirade about how, the demonstrations increasingly have me even like asking like, what are they doing? Is this worth the price you pay politically when Republicans can circulate these videos on social media of the excesses of a few demonstrators, like walking around demanding that Washington diners, raise their fists in support, and these various things that only hurt your cause. All I'm trying to do is explain to you why I suspect that the several progressives I've talked to who kind of admitted to me that they're really kind of fed up with these demonstrations may be the tip of the iceberg. And these are not people who would be on the fence and vote for Trump and then not tell a pollster they're voting for Trump. These are people who are voting for Biden. I just think there is much more widespread disenchantment with these protests, A, than there was a few weeks into them, and B, than is being publicly expressed, and that could be bad news for Biden because although Trump is the incumbent, the fact is that ideologically these protests are very naturally aligned with the Democratic Party. And not
I agree with you up until making the jump to Biden. I don't think that's a thing that most people aren't already like in the tank for Trump are going to think like, I basically agree with you on the protest that they haven't accomplished much. And it seems like a lot of them at this point are kind of like protesting for protesting's sake. And yeah, there seems to be a lot of like tactical miscues that they've done if they wanted to actually accomplish things like not shockingly, like, the state often defeats protest movements because the state has a lot of power and protesters don't really have any power. But okay, so I think I have not raised your Biden serotonin levels in this conversation. But maybe we should move on to something that actually is related to what we were just talking about.
Let me say one more thing about them. Okay. Yeah. So what is Biden up in the national polls now? Like 6%?
Yeah, I mean, it's that's what it seems to mostly be.
So Nate Silver a while ago did a thing. The Electoral College system makes it hard for Democrats to translate popular vote into actual victory. Obviously, he did this thing where it was like a correspondence between given levels of advantage in the popular vote and chances of winning. And it was like, if Biden wins the popular vote by 2%, he probably loses the election. If he wins by, and I think to get him to 90% chance of winning, you had to go to 7%, I think. It was 6 or 7. I think 7 got him to 90%, which means that 6% is like, I don't know what it is. It's maybe 80. And so if these polls are appreciably at all overstating what Trump will get in the popular vote, okay, the national polls, and Biden is now at 6%, let's say they're overstating it by only 1 point. May not be overstating it all, but let's say it's 1 point. Then, we're not, or even the polls now in that case are saying we're not that far from toss-up territory.
Well, I mean, I haven't seen that. We should remember that Nate Silver and 538 did poorly in the last presidential election.
But he was closer. He was closer than just about anybody else. He didn't say 90%. He said 70 or something.
Well, I would say something that's different. A couple things are different from 2016. Aside from Hillary not being on the ballot, one is there's no major third-party candidate who is attracting people as either a protest vote or through their own charisma.
You're not on board with Kanye?
Kanye has only gotten
the Brett Weinstein, the Brett Weinstein initiative. You're up on that?
I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, he did this. He said neither Biden nor Trump meets with his approval, so he was going to start. He set in motion some process by which some people would choose some people, and we wound up with Tulsi Gabbard, and then who's the guy with the eye patch? Crenshaw? Is it Dan Crenshaw?
Yeah. That's the ticket that he's promoting.
Yeah, I can't believe that Brett Weinstein is happy with Tulsi Gabbard, but hey, he got this ball rolling. Anyway,
so this is a write-in. This is a write-in campaign.
At this point, I think it would have to be.
I don't see that taking off. All credit to Brett for someone who's managed to parlay a bizarre campus incident into a national media profile. But
it's more than I've done.
You're not at Evergreen State. There's no Jill Stein. The third party candidate is this Green Party's this guy Howie Hawkins. people aren't paying attention to him. There's a libertarian, Jo Jorgensen. People aren't paying attention to her. Actually, so I got my ballot in the mail today from the state of New Jersey, and her running mate is someone named Spike Cohen, who I don't think I'm related to, but I should.
Spike is a good name. I can see that taking off.
Spike Cohen is a name from like a Don DeLillo novel or something like that. Like that's great, but so I don't know who that is. Anyway, someone is like Biden is going to get over 50%, I think, and I think that changes things. Most of the there were a lot of states that Trump won where he got under 50% because of 5 to 8% of people voted for third party candidates. That's not going to happen this time.
Yeah.
So I think obviously the Electoral College is what actually decides it. But I think that Biden is basically going to replicate more or less like the Obama 2012 map, with maybe some swaps. And it's going to be it's not going to be close in either the Electoral College or the popular vote. Like I think he's going to be over 53, 55, 57%, and Trump's going to be around 43, 46%, something like that.
This is your prediction?
Yeah. If I had to bet, I think before I was saying like 55, 43, something like that. I think we're at 43.
You want to bet even money that you are being too optimistic and that the popular vote margin will be narrower than 12?
I'll think about it.
Name your amount.
We can discuss this. We can discuss this off air. But
I think I'd give you odds on that.
But yeah, I mean, the other thing is the late deciders and the people who don't like either. So a lot of people didn't like either Trump or Hillary, and they voted for Trump. The people today who don't like Biden or Trump say they're going to vote for Biden, because if you don't like Trump, you've had 4 years of Trump, and why not throw the bum out and try the other guy? I mean, I think that is what it comes down to: is referendum on the incumbent, throw the bum out. Mm-hmm. People are sick of all this nonsense kind of thing, and I've been saying for a while, a return to normalcy is a good campaign slogan. The pandemic and the protests have made it so that it seems unclear whether we will return to normalcy anytime soon, but just ending the constant nonsense and craziness of Trump, I think appeals to 50% or more of the population.
I agree. In fact, I think Biden should adopt that more fully in a tonal way. I think he should be a little calmer and seem a little less freaked out and hyperbolic about Trump. He should just feel like a sedative.
Well, this is the point Mickey was making, that Biden seems to have literally slowed in how he's talking and how he's acting, and that makes it so that he's less getting his back up or something, or feeling like he needs to prove himself, which way in the past caused him to make up stuff about his biography and tell other strange lies.
Tell people he can do more push-ups than them.
Right. I mean, actually, the kind of thing where he which I guess this is not really happening anymore, but the one-on-one interactions with the voters, and then when he found some voter who was being an asshole or something, and he was screw you, pal, or something, or I think that was actually pretty endearing. And there are, Chris Christie kind of used that sort of thing of arguing with annoying voters, and some people like that, but I guess that kind of one-on-one stuff isn't really happening because of the pandemic.
Dog-faced, pony-faced. What's the expression?
Yeah, something about a pony-faced something.
Dog-faced, pony. It's some John Wayne line. I love it. I can't remember it, but I love it.
Okay, so we've obviously gone long on this topic, but there's one more I wanted to bring up, and maybe this is too capacious for the time we have remaining, but it's the theory of Bobism that I've secretly developed while listening and watching to you speak and write over the past dozen or so years.
Theory about me, or
it's about your ideology, and it's basically you care a lot about backlash, and in foreign policy, the blob and people who advocate foreign intervention and adventurism don't think about backlash. They think we'll be welcomed as liberators, that kind of stuff. And, so the foreign policy since 2001 has been clear that there's been a lot of times where people should have been more worried about potential backlash and how the people on the ground would have seen us instead of how we see ourselves or how we wish to be seen or something like that. And I think there's also a domestic parallel in your thinking that I see, which is doing, what should if there is a President Biden, what should he do in terms of policy that might potentially spark some sort of backlash on the right? Or, when you say something to rile up your side, you don't think that it's also riling up the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about this in terms of social media, like, retweeting something that makes you feel good, but someone else sees it and they get just as angry as you feel good. And then like people are more and more opposed to each other. Does this ring as true?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, two things that I stress in both foreign policy and in domestic politics are, one is cognitive empathy, which isn't to say feeling people's pain or even caring about them particularly, but at least trying to put yourself in their shoes enough to understand how they see the world. Understand how, like, if you're an Iraqi and like these foreigners come in with guns, you might not immediately warm up to them, even if you were not a big fan of your own leader. And then second, and relatedly, is I try to emphasize the value of at least trying to anticipate blowback from activities, and these two things are related. I mean, I think because let's just take the resistance. I mean, as you know, the precursor, the predecessor of the Nonzero newsletter, available at nonzero.org, was the Mindful Resistance newsletter. And there the idea was that what was being called the resistance was not being mindful enough, not just in the everyday sense of kind of deliberate enough, and circumspect enough. And there was a tendency to just react emotionally and retweet what it felt good to retweet and not give any real thought to how it would be, how certain memes getting momentum within the progressive or the resistance ecosystem might play out in the rival ecosystem, and whether they might not in some cases actually strengthen Trump's narrative. I think one reason people in resistance often didn't give much thought to that is they had this stereotype of Trump supporters as just being these, like, they're all like racists. They're all like, they're hopeless. And in truth, it's a much more complex thing than that. Different Trump voters are motivated by different things. And so, yeah, I mean, if you're connecting my domestic political strategy to my foreign policy views, you're making valid connections.
Mm-hmm. The Mindful Resistance project that we worked on was a lot of that was about trying to think about how to act effectively without sort of like sparking a backlash that would like overwhelm whatever actions you were taking. And I don't know if we really accomplished anything with that project, but I think I'm basically on board with you when it comes to foreign policy, and there's been so many disasters in American foreign policy over the past 2 decades in which clearly like people didn't look at things from the other perspective. I think more domestic policy, it's like the country is so divided. There's something that's going to rile people up no matter what happens in America, like every day. Like I think you made this point recently that like Twitter is a way to find like the worst thing that happened in America every day, and like everyone learns about it.
Well, the most egregious behavior in the other tribe today will be circulated within the ecosystem of your tribe.
And sometimes, sometimes it's not. It doesn't have a political valence or something. Sometimes it's just there was a video that I bought recently of people in a Waffle House. The customers started fighting with the employees, and like it's just like people in their worst moments. Like now suddenly we see this. Everyone can see this in their little device they hold in their pocket. But it's I guess my critique would just be like when there's a large part, like Trump is going to find something, or someone like Trump is going to find something to be mad about, no matter whether it's like something real or something he like mostly invents out of like some random incident. And like Fox News is always going to have something or other that it like gins up. Maybe it probably has some basis in fact, but it's probably like overinterpreted in some way to keep its viewers watching and angry. And like the mechanics of the system are such that that's what people have revealed that they actually want. They want to like be angry and staring at their TV all the time or staring at Twitter all the time. So it's like, what how valid is it thinking about, your own personal actions, and you're just like one person and what you're retweeting and stuff, or when it comes to different policy moves, like they're calling the Democratic Party, at least the message from the White House over the past 72 hours is that the Democratic Party is the anti-Catholic party, because Dianne Feinstein said something kind of mean to this woman who's likely going to be nominated, Coney Barrett, about her religion. And you just see this like distributed, and so there's like this very thin read of truth to it, but it's mostly nonsense. And of course, Joe Biden is Catholic. So it'd be pretty weird that the anti-Catholic party nominates a Catholic to be president. So yeah, there's just like the outreach machine stuff is always ready to be ginned up, like basically no matter what. And if it wasn't anti-Catholicism stuff, they just pick something else, and run with it. And like everyone on their side would like clap and go along with it, and everyone on the other side would be mad. And
yeah, I mean, first of all, you could make the same case about foreign policy. There are always going to be people. I mean, I in my foreign policy writing, I used to invoke the phrase kind of jihadist recruiter to just imagine this person who's trying to recruit like jihadist terrorists abroad. And do you really want to give them fodder by like doing more drone strikes and killing more civilians, whether inadvertently or not, and so on? And you could say, look, those recruiters are always going to have their talking points. They're always going to find something that they can complain about. So what's the difference? And, if you believe that in both cases, in the domestic case and the foreign policy case, the power of propaganda is so strong that there's no real connection between the power of propaganda and the actual empirical base, the actual factual basis that it purports to have, well then, yeah, all bets are off and it's kind of hopeless. And I think I may just commit suicide now if things are so bad. But I don't think things have gotten quite that bad. And I think, I mean, for example, it is just like, surely you would agree that there are things Kamala Harris or Joe Biden could be seen saying now that would help Trump. Possibly even that very Kamala Harris thing of they should keep protesting forever. That could be used to hurt Biden plausibly. So there's a difference between her saying it and me saying it, right? Me saying it in and of itself is not going to make the difference. On the other hand, what makes a politician like Kamala Harris or Joe Biden inclined to say these things can be the groundswell of support for them on social media. They pay attention to the grassroots, to the base. So when I'm preaching in the Mindful Resistance newsletter about memes we should or should not get off the ground, not that I preached about that one in particular, but there are ones I preached about, then now granted, it's just one newsletter. The chances of it being the snowflake that causes the avalanche or in any other sense being decisive may be slim, and I may be deluded to think there's any point in my even persisting in life in trying to change anything. That's totally possible. In fact, I believe it myself in my more sober moments. But the fact that what does build up momentum on social media and become kind of a Democratic-based talking point does have consequence once it starts getting the more prominent the venue in which it's circulated, the more consequence it has. Like if you can get an MSNBC anchor to say it, then it's going to have more power as a talking point for Trump, right? I stand by that. I think in that sense, what happens on social media matters. And so it's worth trying to preach to people about what you think are the smart things to have happen on social media. I mean, I'll give you, this isn't a great example, but I did say in the Mindful Resistance newsletter, like during Russiagate, and I can dig it up and show it to you. I said, look, I'm agnostic on Russiagate, but I will say this, we don't have a smoking gun yet. And this was early on, long before the Mueller report actually came out, certainly a number of months before. I said, we don't have a smoking gun. And it's like, what is the point of us every time there's any kind of circumstantial evidence seizing on it and saying, aha, this is it, and doing this huge thing, because we're just raising the bar of expectations. And if we don't wind up delivering, it's gonna be a loss for us, and it's gonna be something Trump's gonna seize on and use. And I think that has basically happened. And that's a case where, look, obviously I didn't win. I mean, the Mindful Resistance newsletter failed to carry the day. Imagine that. But I stand by that sermon. And that's an example of just being mindful and just like stop and think about it. Of course, I'm human. It made me feel good every time there was some piece of evidence that seemed to indicate that maybe there was something, about Russiagate. But just stop, divorce yourself from your emotions for a second, stop and reflect on what the smart strategy is. And I think in retrospect, the smart strategy was not to obsess about this nearly to the extent that we did, and to just flat out overstate the power of the evidence we had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, emotionalism definitely rules the day on social media, especially Twitter. If you want to get something to go viral, you say it's the greatest thing in the world or the worst thing in the world, or there's just like it's like a machine for revving up emotional responses, and retweeting is often an emotional response. I wonder what you think. I don't think I've talked to you about QAnon at all. Are you familiar with QAnon?
Oh, totally.
Okay,
well, I'm not that familiar, but it is. Oh, it seems like over the last month it's become much more famous. Like 3 months ago, I would have said I've heard the name, remind me, but I know it's this idea that the deep state is populated by pedophiles and only Trump can save us from them, right?
Yeah, it's this kind of, probably most people have heard of it. It's this kind of like postmodern conspiracy theory that envelops all other conspiracy theories, and it seems to be. I mean, if you ask me where the energy on the right is right now, it's more with QAnon than with Trumpism. And Trump is eventually going to go away, but I don't know if QAnon ever will, because it's just this like hermetically sealed container. But I mean, it points to a sort of like postmodern, post-fact world in which, people are like playing detective and finding these clues and making up these things, and then it like leaks into the real world. And there's a woman who got the Republican nomination for a congressional seat somewhere in South Carolina, maybe, who is a professed QAnon believer. And so it does seem to also attract people who maybe weren't really politically aware beforehand, and then they like hear something about it, and then they kind of like fall down a rabbit hole, sort of thing. But it does. I mean, it's bizarre and scary and dumb. But it also like, I don't know, like maybe it's like a vision of things to come is like this like world that is totally divorced from the real world.
It's worrisome. I was just watching this Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, which I don't think is all that great, but it's about this. It's about how social media have a number of pernicious effects, including this. And at one point I didn't totally appreciate is that these algorithms, they're not necessarily designed to do this, but they have the effect of, if you show an interest in any kind of conspiracy theory, then the social media will tend to bring other conspiracy theories to your attention. And I mean, even if there are conspiracy theories that are not crazy. And so, but to whatever extent you kind of like Epstein, like something weird maybe was going on Jeffrey Epstein. But like, if you're interested in that, because people are interested in that are more likely than average to be interested in certain other conspiracies, social media will show you those other. And anyway, it's concerning. I mean, the good news is that we're just, the social media thing is pretty new. We haven't adjusted. There are things you may be able to do either with policy or with, or that things people do just for their own mental health that make things better. But yeah, it's the rate of change is itself in some ways alarming. The rate of technological change makes it hard for us to adjust, in time to avert catastrophe.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, the information technology angle, which you've been writing about for a long time, like, the fact that George Floyd's murder / killing is, whenever someone says murder on blogging heads about George Floyd, there's people in the comments who are angry about that. But George Floyd's death was recorded and then instantly spread all across the world, and people felt a strong kinship with this event, even if they lived far away or were a different race. And it's just this is not how most of human history or even post printing press history went, where either you were you only saw a limited number of people in your life or in your family and small community, or gatekeepers controlled what information you got, and the gatekeepers were the people in the publishing companies or the radio, radio or television or whatever. And so certain things probably wouldn't, maybe they wouldn't have aired this video because it was traumatic or whatever. And
there wouldn't have been the video. The video,
right, someone has the camera in their pocket. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's in a way the biggest, the two things, the fact that every event on planet Earth is recorded in video, A, and B, we have a system for transmitting it to the people who will be most emotionally aroused by it. Any decent person would be troubled by that particular video, but leave that aside. Just, videos of people freaking out about wearing masks in a supermarket, whatever.
Yeah.
There is some group of people that will be deeply antagonized by that, some who won't. Well, the video will get to the ones who will be deeply antagonized by it. This is a recipe for trouble.
Yeah. I actually have asked this question to a couple other guests over the past couple months. If you could wave a magic wand and all social media disappears, the rest of the internet basically stays the same, but social media or the social aspects of other websites, magically disappears and they can't come back. Would you do that? Do you think that'd be a better world if we didn't have social media?
That's a tough one. Because, because look, the omnipresence of video cameras, and I don't know if people appreciate this, I assure you, it has already significantly reduced the amount of police brutality. I told this story to Mickey, but I forget if it was in the Parrot Room, which is only for patrons only. By the way, we should plug the Nonzero Foundation Patreon, which is different from the Parrot Room Patreon. But anyway, give to the Patreon of your choice. The Nonzero Foundation Patreon supports all the blogging heads and meaning of life content and the newsletter.
And that's patreon.com/Nonzero Foundation.
I could not have said it better. In Miami in mid-1990s, I was in a cab with Mike Kinsley. We were at the Miami Book Fair, and this cop was escorting this young Latino guy. He was about 13 years old, was causing no trouble at all. I guess he had done something to piss the cop off, but he was now totally not resisting. The cop just had him by the back of the neck. And this is like a really big, busy street, like a 4-lane street, two lanes in each direction, maybe with an island in the middle. The cop marches the guy along the sidewalk, trips him intentionally, so he'll go down on the ground, gets on top of him, and just starts beating the shit out of him, just punching him in the face repeatedly. And it's like, Mike and I looked at each other. I remember Mike said, I'm not sure who to root for there. I'm like, yeah, I'm not either. Actually, I think I am. But the point is, nothing was going to happen to that cop because nobody was going to video it, and they were going to file this dishonest report.
Right.
And the kid didn't have a leg to stand on. Cops just cannot get away. And first of all, not all cops are bad to begin with by any means, but bad cops can't get away with abuse the way they could. So that's good. And social media is an important part of the process by which these cops are kept. There's all kinds of good things. It's doing the pros and cons is a hard thing. What the one thing I would say is I fear that things are changing faster than we can adapt to without the possibility of really significant and painful disruption.
Yeah, I did a interview with Peter Moskos a couple months ago towards the beginning of the protest movement, and I think he noted that if you look at the cops in New York City were like discharging their weapons like 3 times a day in the 1970s, and it wouldn't even they didn't even have to account for like the bullets, like where the bullets ended up or something like that.
No, they just claimed that the guy was a threat.
Yeah, so things have improved. At the same time, we're talking very soon after the the Breonna Taylor lack of verdict or charges were only being filed against one officer. So that whole story and catastrophic disaster is complicated, but it still remains the case. It's very hard to fire a cop, let alone charge them with a crime, and it rarely happens. But I think so. There definitely are positives and negatives when it comes to social media. I was thinking that I would snap my finger or wave my magic wand and make it all disappear. And I think it's a close call, but I think it has distorted things in a more of a negative way than it's improved things on net.
It's hard to say. I mean, look, I have an old person's bias, which is that things seemed in some sense more secure or something when I was young, even though it was a period of tremendous upheaval. I mean, when I was watching Walter Cronkite on TV and you had these several arbiters of truth that the entire country respected on the different networks, I was living for 3 years as a kid. I was living in San Francisco in 1968, 69, and 70. And if you go back and look at the number of bombings taking place, and I don't remember them. I mean, I remember that the weathermen were bombing, but I don't remember all these bombings that people say were happening, every damn week. But it was wild, and yet I don't remember. I remember it as kind of nice, just because that's the way you remember the past, or you remember certain parts of your life or something. So I'm not really fit to judge, but there's just a lot of this the one thing you're not going to stop is technological progress. So we just got to figure out a way.
Right. And I guess this gets towards, the mindfulness and Buddhism stuff. Can we improve the way our minds work so that we can handle these technological changes?
I'm a believer in mindfulness being an important tool you can use to reconcile social media with mental health and with less in the way of political strife, yes. Yeah.
Do you think, would you advise, I guess this is a related question to the previous one, would you advise people just get off social media unless you need to do it for your job or something? It's
funny, I just recorded this thing with Josh Summers. It'll be on my show. He brought that up. I think if you feel you need it, if it works, fine. As I was telling Josh, I got a new smartphone a few months ago and did not put Twitter on it. I haven't yet. So I still have Twitter, but on a laptop only, and that's a moderating thing. If that works for you. As I said to Josh, I think the optimal thing is to be on social media, but be mindful enough, or whatever the word you want to use, to engage productively on behalf of your values. If you're a progressive, be able to have a civilized conversation with a Trump supporter. Don't freak out. Think before retweeting. Are you really helping your cause ultimately by retweeting this, as opposed to just increasing the following of whoever created the share bait? I think that's the best of all possible worlds. But look, if you're going nuts, pull the plug.
Well, pull the plug. That seems like a good place to end this conversation.
I'm a master at the concluding segue. I've been doing this a lot of years.
Okay, well, Bob, thanks for coming on Culture Determined. I think for the first time, I actually can't remember I know I was on your show
we've done dialogues.
So
I'm not sure if we've done your show.
I don't think so. I've done at least one on yours, and then there was the Commenter Court ones we did, which have been lost to the sands of time, and hopefully never recovered.
Have they?
Yeah, they never got transferred over years and years ago, and maybe they exist on some hard drive.
Posterity's loss
somewhere. But so thanks for coming on, Robert Writer on Twitter. I guess you're not on it that much anymore because it's not on your phone. So
no, I do it on the laptop. I check in. I was never super prolific, and I'm less so now, but I'm there. I encourage following me everywhere.
Okay, and we plugged plenty of other stuff, and the links will be below to those various things.
Yeah, rate and review us, whether it's Aryeh's show or mine, or even there's a Blogging Heads feed you can rate and review if you like us.
Yes, rate and review all of them. Okay, so thank you, Bob. Thank you, viewers and listeners.
Thank you.
See you next time.
All right.